down with coffee, we're going to be going from exposure to exposure to exposure. 4 to 6 on average, 15 to 30 if it's online, exposure to exposure. So let's say you sit down with them for coffee and they say, well, I'm just not sure about the product. So you could, if the product is sampleable, you could have them try the product as another exposure. And you could schedule a time to get back together with them to see how that product experience was for them. Now, you could either gift them a product sample, or you can have them sign up as a customer just to see what the customer experience is like as part of their homework to do the business. If you're going to go buy a McDonald's, you might go walk into McDonald's to see what the customer experience was like and go buy something, right? To see how it all works. Have them try out the product. Have them be a product of the product, right? So if it's not sampleable, let's say it's a service or something, or it's a bigger ticket or whatever it happens to be, if it's not sampleable, maybe it's more information about the product. So you have an exposure and they want to know more, and you could send them to a Zoom or a webinar or a YouTube video or something that explains the product in more detail. Yeah? So you can send them to that exposure and then schedule the time to get together with them after that. And I'm going to talk to you about how to make sure that you book the next exposure. And after that, they did that, and then so first one's coffee, and you're sitting down talking. Second one is a YouTube video on the product. And afterward, you follow up with them afterwards, and they say, well, I got to talk, I need to know more about the compensation plan. Then you could schedule a Skype call with them, and you could sketch it out for them and show them exactly how that worked, okay? And then they say, well, are other people having success? And then you could schedule a 3-way conversation with somebody that's in your business, or you could show them a testimonial of what's going on inside of your business. See what I mean? And then it's next, and then it's next, and it's next, and it's next. Your goal is to never finish an exposure without scheduling the next exposure. Never, ever, ever. Okay? So exposure to exposure to exposure to exposure, never stop until they make the decision to join. Now, once they've made the decision to join, this doesn't stop. You're going to keep going with exposures. They've joined as a customer. You're going to keep going with exposures until they have made the decision yes or no on the business. If they made a decision yes on the business, you're going to keep going with exposures until they have success in the business, right? And once they have success, you're going to keep going with exposures to help them advance their success in this business. So this is a fundamental thing that we're dealing with. Now, how do you schedule the next exposure? Give me an example. A proper invite for follow-up. Let's say I sit down with somebody for coffee. And we have a chat. I tell them my story. I show them the business. And they say, I need to talk to my spouse. Usually, when a person says, I need to talk to my spouse, that is code word for one of two things. One is, I'm just using this as an excuse to get away from you because I'm not really interested, and I'm just going to put this out there so I can get away and think. That's one. Two is, that spouse has told them in no uncertain terms, don't you dare join another opportunity without talking to me, because if you do, you're going to be in big trouble, buddy. Don't do it, right? So you need to give them some space. Some people say, well, let me talk to your spouse. You're getting in a weird dynamic. Stay away from that. But if you could tell the person, say, let's say I'm talking to a guy. He says, I got to talk to my wife because, we make all these decisions together, right? Fine. What I don't want is for him to go home and try and verbally say what I've been saying to him, because he's going to screw it up. And there's all kinds of dynamics. He's going to say, honey, and she's going to say, don't honey me. And there's going to be all this little stuff that's going on, right? So I have to equip him for this next exposure. I say, listen, let me give you the perfect way for your spouse to truly understand, because she might be able to hear it from you, she might not. She might be able to hear it from me, she might not. But there's a video I have here that's on YouTube. It's 30 minutes long. If I gave you a link to this video, would you show it to your spouse? And let your spouse make a decision based upon what she sees there. If I gave you this, sorry. I thought I hit do not disturb, but I didn't. Everybody say hi to Marina. Hi, Marina. If I gave you this link to this YouTube video, would you show it to your spouse? Question number one. If I, would you? If I gave you this link, if I gave you this product sample, if I gave you this magazine, if I scheduled a three-way call, if I invited you to a Zoom, if I invited you to this training that's on Saturday in the local area, if I, whatever, would you? In this particular example, if I gave you a link that you could share with your spouse that would explain it better than you or I could, would you show it to her as part of that conversation you're going to have together to be able to make a decision? If I, would you? Wait for the answer. They'll 99 out of 100 times say yes to that question. If I, would you? This is my secret weapon. This series of questions, my secret weapon. If I, would you? Okay? Next question. When do you think you'll have a chance to see it together for sure? When do you think you and your wife will have a chance to see that video for sure? Okay? When do you think you'd have a chance to use that product sample I'm going to give you right now for sure? Right? So get a time. When do you think you and your spouse, you and your wife could watch this? Yeah, we could watch it, in the next 2 days. Fantastic. So, if I called you after that, you'll have seen it or done it for sure, right? Pardon my writing, but if I gave you a link to a YouTube video that would explain this better than you or I could to your spouse, would you show it to her? Would you watch it together? Yes or no? Yes. When do you think you could see it for sure? I could see it by Wednesday night, for sure by Wednesday night. If they say, I don't know when I could see it, just give me a time for sure. So I don't waste your time and you don't waste mine. Just give me a time that absolutely by then you'll be able to see it. Okay, by Friday. Fantastic. So if I called you on Saturday, you'll have seen it for sure, right? Now they're going, oh, okay, this is a professional process. What's the best number and time for me to call? Call your cell. What time? 10 a.m. on Saturday? All right, fantastic. I've scheduled the next exposure. The next exposure is 10 a.m. Saturday. You understand? See, some people say, I need to talk to my spouse. They have no intention of talking to their spouse. They're just saying words, right? To finish this exposure, finish their coffee, and move on with their day. But they might be like me, somewhere on the clock dial, that if you professionally go through this, you're not going to convince somebody to do something they don't want to do. But if you professionally go through this, you're going to help them, right? So if I go to them and say, if I gave you a link to a video that would explain it better than you or I, it's about 30 minutes long on YouTube, would you watch it with your spouse as a way for her and you to understand this more completely? Sure. In their mind, they're like, fine, give me the link. When do you think you could see it for sure? Now, internally, on a subconscious level, they're like, oh, this is a business conversation. When do you think you can see it for sure? I'm not so sure. What? Just give me a time for that absolutely positively you'll have seen it. Answering that first question, give them a link, right? You ask, if I would you, they have maybe a 10% chance of watching that video. You ask the second question, when do you think you can see it for sure? You take it to 50%, just from that second question. So if I called you on Saturday, you'll have seen it for sure, right? I just took it to 80%. What's the best number and time for me to call? Cell phone? Want me to text you first? 10 a.m. on Saturday? Fantastic. I'll text you at 10 a.m., make sure that you're clear, and then I'll give you a buzz. All right, talk to you Saturday. And I'm gonna text you right now the link to that YouTube video. Can't wait to hear what you think about it. Okay? Now, I've done my job. My job is to go from the coffee exposure to the video exposure. Now, some people, when you call them on Saturday, you're going to text them, hey, you available? They're going to say, oh, sorry, I didn't have a chance yet. I haven't had a chance to watch it. Okay? Or you call them and they say, I haven't had a chance to watch it. Life got in the way. I got too busy. You could get mad at them, and I used to do that, and it doesn't work out well. I would not suggest it. Or you could just say, that's no problem. When do you think you could watch it? For sure, for sure. Okay? And I literally say, no problem. And I say, for sure, for sure. Play with this. I'm telling you it works. And then I would go through this process. So if I called you after that, you'll see it for sure, right? All right, what's the best number and time for me to call? All right, boom. And I've just scheduled the next exposure. I get to the next exposure. You've seen it. All right, what'd you like best? You get into another conversation. They say, you know what? I just don't understand how this thing works financially. Say, no problem. If we got online and we just did a FaceTime or a Skype conversation, do you have Skype? Yeah, I do. Or do you have FaceTime? Yeah, I do. If I got online and I showed you how the compensation plan worked, would you be willing to take the 15 minutes in order to be able to learn how it works? Because I think you're going to love it. All right, when do you think you could do that? When are you available? Let's schedule a time. All right, fantastic. I scheduled the time, and now I've scheduled the next exposure. I schedule the time, I do that thing. Afterwards, they might have some more questions. And then I take them to the next thing, and I use this process to do it. Whatever the next assignment is, if I give you this solution, would you take the solution? When do you think you could take the action for sure? If I called you after that, you'll have seen it or done it for sure, right? What's the best number and time for me to call? Fantastic. My goal is to just keep this going. Exposure, 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 exposure. Using this with assignments, having a list of things that's not just my voice. There's video links, there's Zoom calls, there's events, there's product itself, there's literature, there's clinical reports, there's website information, there's other leaders that I'm going to be using in these exposures. I'm going to introduce them to other people. I'm going to let them see the big picture. All different kinds of things. But the goal is continue the exposures. That's it. Now, what you want to do is condense this as much as possible, and you need to be patient. In this process, I used to do this just for inviting people to events. I was so good at this. Oh my gosh. Once I had an exposure with somebody, it was very difficult for that person to avoid the next exposure with me. And I took people that were here on the clock dial. They were not ready at all. And because of exposures, I swung them through So they were in the zone where they're ready to make a decision. So it's like,